right. Do you want to?
I will give my little spiel. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you all for joining us tonight for the CPDC meeting of Monday, August 14th, 2023. I'm Community Development Director Andrew McNichol. From staff, we also have Senior Planner Mary Benedetto. On the board tonight, everybody present is in person, starting with Tom Armstrong, Tony Diarezzo, Chair John Weston, and Hillary Mative. We do have this set up as a hybrid meeting, so we have members in the audience and members over the Zoom. If you are in person, please sign in the corner if you haven't already. And if you are on Zoom, please stay muted until acknowledged upon. We're going to run this meeting in the similar format of a regular in-person hearing. The applicant is going to present their application to the board. The board will provide comment and question amongst themselves and then open up to public comment. If you do have public comment in person, please raise your hand and the chair will acknowledge you. If you're on the Zoom, please use the raise hand feature found under reactions, or if your camera is on, you can also raise your hand and I'll look to point you to the chair for comment. Outside of that, I can add that we are live and being broadcasted and recorded on RCTV on all the local channels and soon to be on YouTube when they post it there. So I think that's it from me.
Great, thanks. You have that down.
I'm trying my best. I'm getting there.
So the first two items on our agenda have either been, well, they're both withdrawn.
They are both withdrawn, so
we don't even need to read anything and off we go, right? Or do we
you
need
do
to?
need to at least make a motion to
Okay.
accept the withdrawal without prejudice
All right.
in a vote. I'll share at least the 25 Haven letter on screen for the moment.
Motion to withdraw the application for 40R for 25 Haven Street LLC as of today, August 14th, 2023.
Second.
Comment?
Oh, comment, sorry.
So just so to remind everybody, this was for the 40R application that was applied for, I want to say close to a year ago now. The mosque application site plan review is still moving forward and going towards permitting now that you had approved at your last meeting, I believe that was. So this was for the 40R specifically.
Okay, with the motion on the floor, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So for this next one, it's gonna be a little wonky because it's an application you haven't discussed yet and was scheduled for tonight. Unfortunately, the applicant is no longer moving forward and has withdrawn the application. However, because we've posted it and noticed it, you have to read the notice, open it, and then withdraw the application. It's kind of a formality. Yeah.
Okay. So,
and if you have
read
questions.
the notice.
Notice is hereby given that under sections 4.3, 4.4, 4.6, and 5.3 of the Reading zoning bylaw, the Community Planning and Development Commission, CpDC, will hold a public hearing on Monday, August 14th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. in the Select Board Room at Town Hall, 16 Lowell Street, Reading, Mass. And through the remote and online measures below to hear the site plan review and special permit application submitted by Allison Mann of Mutts and Wigglebutts for the property located at 1312 Main Street, Assessors Map 51, Lot 79. The applicant is proposing to renovate the existing veterinary clinic building into an animal kennel dog daycare used for overnight boarding.
Thank
A
you.
copy of the application and accompanying plans are available to the public on Town Hall by appointment and on the town website the Thursday prior to the hearing.
Thank you very much. Inclined to question if you do auctions on the side, but so yes, this was a special permit was for specifically an animal kennel use at the 1312 Main Street site. You might recall that 1310 developed a new animal clinic and is fully operational. So that existing building was to become an animal kennel, but whatever happened, they are no longer moving forward. So they have requested to withdraw. If we can have a motion or questions, happy to take.
Do we need to open to the public still? Couldn't hurt.
It couldn't hurt, yeah.
Any questions, because we don't have any answers. So ask away.
Yeah, nothing on the Zoom.
All right.
Motion to close the public hearing for 1312 Main Street.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll second those.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
And now if we can do a motion to withdraw the,
Motion to withdraw the 1312 Main Street application and
okay.
special plan.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, thank you, great
All right.
discussion. And now we can.
All right. Now, on to, all right, we have a continued public hearing for major modification and definitive subdivision and stormwater permit at Grandview Road Extension.
Yes, so I believe the applicant is half here, half online. I know their engineer is online, so Gio, I'm gonna pass it to you. I can share the plans on screen, or I can make you co-host if you'd rather share them. But if you maybe wanna summarize where we are to date and the changes made to date.
Sure thing, yeah. So Giovanni Federo with Federo Engineering, project engineer. Last time we were at the Cpdc meeting presenting, I know there was discussion about having property lines between lots 1 and 2 changed from when it was previously approved. And that was to take into consideration for having the shed for lot 1 to be entirely within that lot. We thought it through and we did go back and said, hey, you know what, let's just keep the property lines the way it is as it was previously approved, and we're going to relocate that shed entirely on lot 1. There was another change of adding the double catch basin, a secondary double catch basin at the end of the cul-de-sac, and that was to take into account if the primary catch basin did start to clog or overflow, there was a secondary catch basin there to capture any flooding or whatnot, you know. So that was added to the plan, and we did also add a fence on lot 4 at the retaining wall up against the driveway. And so those were the 3 changes that we made since the previous time we were here at CPDC meeting, and I believe we've hit all the check marks, and so I believe we've satisfied everything that the CPDC had of concern, and so I just I think that would be it. I'd like to discussing amongst you. So
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Gio, can you confirm that the riprap has been moved? It used to be close to the borderline behind the property.
yes, the riprap. Sorry for the music in the background. The riprap right up as the outflow of that detention pond, it has been relocated to be at least 10 feet away from the property line. So that has been adjusted for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I note that the detention pond has a depth of about 6 or 7 feet. What's the approximate water on a 10-year storm, 25-year storm, 50 and 100?
The 10-year, I don't have the 10-year or the 25-year or the 50-year. I know at the 100-year storm, it's at elevation 107. So, but the other storms, I can get that information. I don't have it off the top of my head.
I'm just looking at any possibility of injury to person going into it. Let me see your diagram. You said 107?
Elevation 107 is at 100-year storm.
So that would be 4 feet of elevation, I see.
That's correct.
Okay. I a little bit off storm water, but I thought I saw you've got a low flow, low pressure system for septic. but I didn't see a stub going to lot 2. Am I right or wrong on that?
I believe we did create a stub on the utility plan that would be on, I believe it's either sheet C5 or C6. So C5 right there.
We just get 8.5 by
11, so it might be there, but I didn't see it. I just wouldn't want the cul-de-sac torn up when the other lot goes in. And for,
If you can finish and we'll open it up.
and then, and this is just for clarification, I've seen 2 different things. I saw one that lot 2 was sold. Is it sold or under contract to sell?
I don't have that information. I believe it's still, I don't know.
I have the answer.
So that is also on the applicant.
Okay.
Um,
Sure, if you wanna, write both questions, yeah.
Go ahead. So as far as the.
Like if you could come up and introduce, sorry, I should have added for everybody, public comment or applicant wise, just name and address for the record.
Yeah,
Is
this
it-
is Adam Office. I'm here for the party as well, and Andrew, I'm the one that sent you over the agreement.
Lot 2 is not sold, it's under common ownership now. Part of the agreement with Penny Jean, that after the project is completed, she will get title to that one lot. And it's all per an existing agreement that's been agreed to by the parties and has been shared in substance with the town.
Do you have,
That's good.
do you have other?
That explains it. Yeah, I just wanted to, should I say my name, Michael Salamone, 45 Beacon Street, Reading. As far as the stub, the stub for lot 2, the owner of that is gonna be the owner of that lot, does not want it to be stubbed to the lot because she doesn't want it.
Because she doesn't want?
Correct.
No,
Doesn't
sorry.
want to what?
You were talking about the stub out to lot 2, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
The owner of that lot doesn't want it to be stubbed out.
Okay, let me ask this.
We're-
If she has to connect to the sewer system, does she have to cut out the asphalt?
Yes.
Personally, I don't think that's a good idea. Now you're
That
gonna-
was what she told me, so I was relaying that to you guys.
Okay. I hear you.
I suppose we can stub it right to the property line.
Yeah,
If you want us to
that's
stop-
that's what I would mean, yeah, just so that the asphalt doesn't have to be cut up again.
Yeah.
And Andrew, this one might be more for you. Is it common practice that we would get a copy of the HOA agreement? Because
It
we wanna
is.
make sure that there's agreement to maintain the private roadway as well as the drainage
Yep,
system.
it is common on the staff level to receive that, review the language, provide comment and question, and make sure it hits all the key points that we discuss here. And that is conditioned in the original approval.
All right, other questions, comments? Other comments or questions from the public? See anyone online?
I do not at this time.
All right, I think we've gone over this quite a bit. So we can close public hearing if people feel like we're ready to do that.
Yeah, we can go through the decision
Or
first
through
if
the
you
decision
want.
first.
Yeah, let's do that.
That way, if there are public comments, we can accept them.
Mhm.
I'm open either way.
Okay, so here at the top, we had noted that this is a modification to an approved definitive plan, and this includes language both to the modification requirements and because this modification, to refresh your memory, came after your revised stormwater regulations, that stormwater permit was triggered under the general bylaw, so that is captured herein as well. The list of materials that have been submitted to date are summarized. We noted the original approval from February 8th, 2021, which they did get an extension as well at your last meeting, so that has been captured in a separate decision as well on this project. So the current proposal is to modify a few of the lots, but most specifically to the area of work, extending the area of tree removal to provide larger backyards than what was originally approved. Wooded area has increased from 29,700 to 34,000 with a few square feet of play there. But grass space has also increased for the future homeowners. A lot of the modification also dealt with the grading and drainage of the site. So to remind everybody, the right-of-way was lowered by approximately 2 feet, and the grading has now been revised to push all flow down that right-of-way, captured in the right-of-way, flow down to the right-of-way to the 2 double catch basins that Geo has put on the plan, and those catch basins will gravity convey the runoff to a open infiltration basin, which will be treated beforehand before reaching the basin. So the original approval included underground stormwater infiltration chambers, which has been modified to that detention basin that I had just mentioned just a second ago. So both are acceptable practices under stormwater management and DEP. Of course, there's comments on both that can go either way. To add the impervious area for Lot 2, which is not proposed to be built at this time through this applicant. However, the Lot 2 impervious area, the driveway, has been captured, but if a future home is placed there, will need its own separate dry well and roof runoff collection. So we had a few comments also on the drainage of Lot 4, daylighting over Lot 3 and into the right-of-way. That has been addressed, and similar on the sewer utility comments that were previously mentioned. So engineering is okay with the sewer design. There will be a drainage easement for this infrastructure, and again, we summarize the trees and landscaping, as well as the retaining wall and screening being provided on Lot 4. We mentioned the stormwater permit applicability due to the triggering of a disturbance of 1 acre or more. And we noted that conservation did require a review. I believe it was administratively handled. I could be wrong. I can check in on that, but conservation took a look. It didn't trigger a formal process through them. And similar to all subdivisions, Board of Health was notified with the application. No comments. The applicant is not requesting or proposing any new waivers as part of this modification, but we did keep the existing waivers just to provide some context to the design as well. The standard conditions we noted, a lot are very standard. We referenced the February 8th, 2021 decision, which has a lot more conditions within it than this specific draft decision, the HOA docs, prior to building permitting, etc. So we use that as staff we'll use both decisions to track conditions and make sure all targets are being hit. The stormwater permit itself has a series of specific conditions related to inspections and approvals prior to moving forward with building permits, occupancy permits, and post-occupancy. So those have been captured herein. Prior to plan endorsement, because this plan will need to be re-endorsed by the CPDC at a future date. If any plan revisions, I did not hear any to date, so we can likely remove that condition unless we wanted to include something on the stubbing of Lot 2.
Yeah, because the way I look at this, right, there's a right, the sewer pump and the line
Mhm.
that's on that property, right, you wouldn't put the pump in there,
Right.
right? If you're not, you just stub it, so I think it is important to note
Mhm.
that this body agreed that going just to the property line is an approved modification. So that, you're right,
Mhm.
someone doesn't say, well, it's on the plan.
And we can work on this language a bit tomorrow. Thank you, good comment. Mylar is similar for endorsement, always needed for signature, and any electric utility and easements by RMLD will be needed. Prior to the commencement of site work or utility work, we'll need a copy of the recorded plans. The applicant shall meet with us in the engineering division to resolve any outstanding comments that may not be resolved yet in the memo or further clarification needed. I don't think there's anything outstanding where we would have heard about it, but just for all sake, in the original decision, we've conditioned a pre-construction meeting, we've conditioned certain construction plans, level plans, fire department review, and so on. So this is just really specific to the modification. Prior to the issuance of a full building permit, we will need to see that lot 2 has been conveyed and all proper documents and easements are there,
And we want to see that the shed has been moved.
and that the shed has been moved. We can work on that language as well tomorrow. Thank you, noted. Prior to the occupancy for any lot, again, a lot of more conditions within the original decision, but we will want to make sure that the access easement and utility easement is established between lot 3 and 4, and that the homeowner's documents now are revised to better reference this detention basin and the maintenance that such requires, as well as the catch basins and private right-of-way. We did want to make a note that if lot 2 is to be built by a separate builder or applicant at any time, they too will need to join that homeowners association and support the maintenance of the site. So we reference that as well. And that was everything I had.
Any comments? We all
Made my
good with
comments
that?
during the
All right.
review.
All right,
In that case, are we ready for a vote?
I think we need to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Move to close the public hearing for whatever this one is. Sorry,
Grandview Road,
Grandview Road, thank you.
all those in favor?
Aye.
And then a motion for the approval of the major modification.
One quick question to Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a major modification, which means that the waivers already exist and we don't have to re-vote on them.
Correct.
Okay. In that case, motion to approve the major modification for definitive subplan approval for 4 Cold Spring Road, also known as Grandview Road Extension, as amended.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? All right,
Thank you all. That was captured in this decision. Although if we could maybe amend the motion to say major mod and stormwater permit. I don't know if it's too late to do this. We'll make it, we'll write it in. Yeah. Thank you, Gio and team. We'll get you the decision as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Make sure I see this. Okay,
Just moving along tonight.
we are right on schedule.
Are we?
You have a 1 minute wait for your next one.
It gives me just enough time to pull the plans up.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
I'm ready when you are.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item is continued hearing for 45 Beacon Street subdivision.
Great, and Mr. Angelo Salamone is here in person. His engineer, Phil Christensen, is online. Phil, I have the plans. I can share them on screen. I know it's been a few months. I think May was the last time we discussed this. So maybe if you want to give a overall site project description and then kind of what's been changed to date and where we are. But let me get those plans on screen for you.
Okay. Yeah, the project consists of developing 3 building lots. There's one existing house on an existing lot and 2 new lots built off a cul-de-sac. So on this plan, well, you can see that's a plan which is requested based upon if we had to widen the street out to 60 feet. The current layout is 40 feet wide, and your rules require a 60-foot wide roadway. The applicant only has control of 94 feet of frontage on Beacon Street. So if we were to widen it to 60 feet, you could see he wouldn't meet the front setback. And considering all of Beacon Street is 40 feet wide, this would be the only section of the roadway that would be 60 feet. We could create the 3 lots and provide the 60 feet, but it doesn't seem reasonable. Doesn't seem like a reasonable thing to do. You'll notice in the last paragraph here, paragraph 3, it's improperly written. It says it would not be illogical to have a 94-foot length of a road, 60 feet in width, and the remaining 810 feet of road to be 40 feet. Obviously, it says it would not, it should be illogical, should be logical. So it would not be logical to make this change here. So what we did was work with the roadway width of 40 feet. Within that, provided and that's the plan for the 40-foot wide roadway. We comply with the new lots, comply with all the zoning setback requirements, zoning area and frontage. And then the roadway itself, which should be the next sheet. Yeah, that's a simplified view without the topography on it, but what we proposed is a 24-foot wide road leading into a full cul-de-sac that meets the 45-foot radius requirement of your regulations. It would require a wall around almost half the roadway, as you can see, just to help meet the grades. It's a very steep property. Additionally, the road initially complies with your zone, with your planning regs of 10-foot or 10% grade, but the cul-de-sac we maintained at a 5% grade downhill. Your regulations require a 3% grade maximum, but again, it was just to eliminate some of the grade change in this roadway. We would have a cross slope of 2% as required by your rules. Additionally, we collect the drainage at the end of the cul-de-sac in 2 catch basins, and more than likely provide an infiltration system for that. We're also providing additional catch basins on the lots to catch drainage that would come down from those lots, rather than have it flow on the road, flow into the catch basins and then discharge down below. Obviously, since the preliminary plan, we haven't done detailed hydraulic and hydrologic analysis, but this is approximately the direction we would head with the definitive plan. So I think the 24 width of pavement satisfy the requirement from the previous review. Also, the full cul-de-sac satisfies that requirement. And the supplemental plans that we submitted in terms of, this plan shows the grading that would be necessary. As I said, it's a steep property. The property itself in the back where the cul-de-sac and the 2 houses are had been disturbed, so there's not a lot of vegetation on that area right now. So it would have a fairly high runoff coefficient. And I think with proper design, we could in fact handle all of the stormwater management regulations with infiltration system down there. We would use a bituminous curb around the cul-de-sac and the roadway to confine the drainage water to the road, and be sure it goes in the catch basins at the end. So that's just a quick summary of what we're proposing.
Thank you.
And to maybe just add in there, this is a preliminary application for the board and public alike. So the level of detail that a definitive has, I think Phil alluded to, you don't have the full grading plan yet, you don't have the full drainage plan yet. A few other certain elements that would get a deeper review in a definitive plan. A preliminary plan really gives the applicant a sense of confidence in the right-of-way design from a bird's eye view that they can move forward with for a definitive design and start determining some of these underlying factors that will impact the development.
Thank you. Comments from the board or questions?
Well, we can start with the first one. I believe the last meeting, there was a question of any limits put on the original subdivision for this property. Have we seen what those original limits were?
I have not found those limits.
Okay.
I think that might have been a different site.
It could be.
It's a typical question on subdivisions, but we have not found that.
Okay. And in this plan, that right-of-way access from Main Street up is pretty much ignored. It's not part of the development. It still exists, but actually, if you're putting up a wall, it'll probably be a dead end at that point, would it not?
Are you referencing this right of way here?
That one, yes.
Yes, we'd improve the right of way just from where that left turn is on Beacon Street. The remainder of Beacon Street would remain as it is, and it is a cul-de-sac, and it's not proposed to be extended. I don't really think you could meet grading allowances and get down to where Grandview Road dead ends into this property.
I was referring to the other right-of-way from Main Street up to the property, almost parallel to Bethesda.
Oh, the other right of way out that goes, okay. That'll remain as it is, but we're not utilizing that for this project.
They're correct. And it really becomes useless because you're gonna have a wall around your cul-de-sac, so you'll have no way of actually accessing it.
Well, it's just that existing lot would have access to it.
Okay. And speaking of the wall around the cul-de-sac, what's the height of that wall?
It varies from, it starts at about 2 feet, gets up to about 6 feet in height. But it varies around the length of the cul-de-sac.
I know on property for 6 feet, I need a fence. What would I need for a roadway with a 6-foot drop off?
You may need guardrails. I think for any wall next to right away, you would need a guardrail around it, yes.
So other than, my only other question was, what's the difference between a 10% grade and a 3% grade on the road that you're proposing?
7%.
Well, the 10% grade,
7% upgrade is.
Couldn't help. Let's help.
Well, clarify first what you're proposing. I've heard 3, 5, and 10.
okay, the 3% is a requirement in your rules for a slope on a cul-de-sac. So the slope in the travel direction on a cul-de-sac can't exceed 3%. We are proposing a 5% grade there. On the straight portion of the road, it's a 10% grade, which complies with your planning board rules and regulations. So we would need a variant or a waiver on the grade down the travel length of the cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac also grades to the left and right, and that would be maintained at 2% as required by your rules.
When you reference the travelway and the cul-de-sac, are you talking about the circular portion and the straightaway as two separate sections?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way your rules are written, so that's what we try to follow here.
Would the fire department likely to have an objection to the higher grade, steeper grade?
That was not a comment we received from fire department. I have questions when a drainage report comes in, what it means for flow and velocity and capture, but we don't know that detail yet at this stage, so. But I will double check on the steepness for the fire truck.
With the wall being in the way, if the wall is significant, sometimes they need over the curb clearance, so
Right,
is that location of that wall within,
They review the plans and sign off on them.
Yeah.
With the acceptance that it is a preliminary plan.
right,
And that conceptually, they're
conceptually,
okay with it.
So that's a good question. Who has in town hall, who has reviewed these and offered comments if they have any?
All DRT staff departments have received and reviewed it. We didn't get any formal comments. Engineering withstanding till drainage comes in, and finer grading details. Fire department acknowledged that at least a 45-foot radius and 24-foot paved right-of-way meets minimum standards and expectations, but that's been the level of comment, not much more than that.
So I'd like to dig in a little bit to the two, the concept plan and I'm gonna call it the proof plan. I don't know if that's really what it's called. So I guess first of all, right, here, the bulb, right, that plan. Right, the bulb on the left-hand side of the page is not really a bulb. And, right, this all looks very tight, and to my naked eye, I can't tell whether this is in fact 60-foot diameter circle, 100% of what around the circle, or whether it's been modified in.
No, it's
one location.
60 feet all the way, 60-foot radius around the entire circle.
All right, so I guess I also don't know where, how that plays with the transitions, right? If you were to build, right, the purpose of me bringing this up is the intent of having this is, right, to build a right-of-way that uses this area, you can't with this layout because of the corner there. And so to me, one question on this is this a sort of a legitimate proof plan? Because that's not this. My thought is that this whole thing needs to be moved up some so that can actually work. That's question one.
It does work. I mean, it's worked on a computer and try to fit things in as best you can, and it fits. It goes through that corner.
No.
There's a almost a 90-degree angle on the westerly side of the cul-de-sac transition into the right-of-way, into the straightaway, yeah. And so if we were actually to build a roadway that is 60 feet wide with that size of a cul-de-sac, we couldn't do it. And that's the intent of doing this exercise is to prove out whether there's sufficient land to be able to build this. Not that we're going to approve this, not that we're going to build that, but that's the reason for doing this plan. And to me,
Well, the building doesn't go out to 60 feet. The building of the cul-de-sac goes out to 45 feet. So it's 15 feet in from the edge of the right-of-way. So I don't understand your problem with it.
Andrew, do you understand?
I do
Yes, if you could have engineering take a look and see whether this is an acceptable configuration.
You got it.
That's item one. Item two, I'm going to go back to the plan before that. So again, if this plan is to, right, because our requirements are that you need to prove out that you can do a 60-foot right-of-way. I guess I want some guidance here. If the 60-foot right-of-way then for a subdivision then creates a non-conformance because the existing house is then too close to the lot line, right?
Yep.
And so we can't do that, right? We couldn't approve this subdivision if this is what we wanted to do, right? If this is what was going to be built, we could not approve this. And so going back to that same thing, is this a legitimate proof? I mean, does this prove out the concept that it can be built? Because we couldn't approve this.
Yeah.
Even if they're going to build
demolish
it.
the house.
What's that?
The plan itself is valid.
Yeah.
You would still have a lot, you would have a lot of adequate frontage and area, and you could demolish the house and you'd have 3 building lots with a 60-foot right-of-way, which would be kind of stupid at the end of a 40-foot right-of-way that you can't expand because you'd have the same problem with every house on Beacon Street. Because the distance between the houses on Beacon Street, one side to the other, is probably less than 70 feet. So you can't get a 60-foot right-of-way in there. So this proof plan works. I don't see your argument that it doesn't work.
I'm not saying it
It doesn't. There are questions to me of whether this meets the letter of the law.
Yep.
And I'm not going to approve something that doesn't. So, right, like you said.
It does meet the letter of the law, because the letter of the law is frontage and area, and you could demolish that house and that lot 3 would still stand on its own.
Demolishing a house is the
requirement in order to prove out that you have a subdivision that works.
And I'll step back if I can. So we had requested this proof plan, noting quickly that we didn't receive it in the original submission. From the time the applicant worked on it to submit it, and I had done some research on past subdivision applications which had utilized an existing paper street right-of-way. Those subdivisions did not require a proof plan, similar to proving a 60-foot right-of-way if they were utilizing a right-of-way of lesser design that existed already. So actually, in essence, we almost requested this, pretty much requested this in error, because you don't need to prove to the 60-foot right-of-way width. You do need the 60-foot cul-de-sac bulb still, but that 60-foot throat width is actually not a requirement.
Yeah.
So we did some due diligence after the request. So my apologies for the confusion.
That's fine. That still stands though
It
for my
does,
questions
yes.
about the other.
Yes,
The
the bulb
other issue,
itself,
the bulb
yes,
itself.
yeah. Which again, on this plan, difference of design,
Right,
so.
right. And I'll back up a little bit. It does look like that bulb can fit. It's not that it can't fit. I don't think that it's in the
Just
right
need to shit
place.
right, yeah. Great.
Which then again may impact the slopes and.
Yeah.
But then again, is there anything saying that the cul-de-sac that's built within the right-of-way has to be centered on the right-of-way?
Yes, there's a center line that needs to go down.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, if you look at the, let's see, if you look at sheet 4, the cul-de-sac is centered within the right.
I'm trying to find some wiggle room in there for you.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's centered in the right.
Yeah.
And the requirement for the curves on the pavement meets your planning board rules and regulations. Your planning board rules and regulations are 15% radius at the intersection of where the circle meets the straight roadway length.
Other questions or comments?
Is this another low-pressure system? So for sewer?
Yes,
And the discharge point will be to the top of the hill?
yes, there's an existing sewer there.
Let's see. This would be something internally we'd have to look at, but the question is the slug sewer water gonna get there fast enough so it doesn't get stale and stuff like that? And did I observe correctly that there's a fire hydrant at the top of the hill? Or is that another site?
No, that's proposed at the end of the cul-de-sac. There's a fire hydrant proposed.
Okay. Well, kind of the bigger issue here is you're getting some of my sense here. Yeah, again, this is going to be a private street, private road. Beacon is not in as good a shape because it's a private road as the city roads are. There has to be support given to the bulb, the cul-de-sac. In other words, it's got to be maintained. which is a little bit of a concern, because we've got 3 members of the association to maintain it, and things like that, but I mean, it's a little bit more concerning here, but than on the other side. We just reviewed.
There's more to it.
Actually, potentially too, as the existing homeowner may not be required to maintain
Well,
the cul-de-sac.
that's true too. Well, we don't know that for a fact yet. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. 3 makes it better, obviously. Well, I mean, it to me is that I think we would have to be convinced that the retaining wall to support the bulb is good and low maintenance. In other words, probably railroad timbers aren't going to be good enough.
No, this would be a segmented block wall. You're probably familiar with Shea's block walls. Shea Precast makes blocks that are generally about 14 inches high, 4 feet in length, 2 feet in depth. And you stack them up. If the wall gets high, sometimes the base block is 6 feet deep to provide additional support. And the wall has a 1.5 inch batter per block as it goes up. So they use pretty commonly, and I've designed many of those over the years. So it's a sturdy wall and it stays in place, and no one has any problems with it. I mean, provided obviously it's built correctly with proper gravel backfill and stone backfill and drainage. But
Understood.
that's the type of wall you would use on this.
Andrew, do we know how long Beacon Street is?
I want to say 700 to 800 feet. I could be wrong. Let me see if I can get a quick estimate for you.
I think early on there was a request for a waiver of the 500.
I know that was on the prior,
Right.
but I didn't see it on the list of waivers for this one.
Beacon Street from Locust is approximately 700 feet based on the GIS, which from Chestnut it's another 360.
So Locust would be the nearest intersection? Since the street already exceeds the 500 limit, I assume he wouldn't need a waiver? The 500 limitation for a dead end?
Correct.
How does it presently exceed the limit?
But because the road exceeds 500 feet in length and you're building what's essentially a dead end cul-de-sac extending from it,
Well,
is a waiver required.
I mean, Beacon Street isn't a cul-de-sac as it is it?
Right, that's the point being.
It's a through street, correct?
Okay, there's a second Beacon Street.
Right, there's a second
There's
Beacon
two
Street.
Beacon Streets, and we're extending off an intersection. We're not extending off the end of a cul-de-sac. So our cul-de-sac is approximately 200 feet long from a through street. I don't think we asked for a waiver on cul-de-sac length.
You did not, but I kept hearing Beacon Street is a private way, which in my mind told me that while you're extending a private way, extra feet, does it exceed the 500, not realizing that there's a private way Beacon Street which intersects at that location.
Okay, understand.
So, right, there's a couple of waivers that are that are also gonna be sought. I think we've talked about through most of those. Constructing the new roadway within the existing 40-foot wide layout rather than expand it to 60, I think, right, that's typically something that we have agreed with in the past, and don't see any reason not to in this case. Provide a pavement width of 24 feet rather than 30 feet. Again, you know, in many cases, less pavement is better.
My only problem with the 24 feet to 30 is if you start getting cars parked on the side of the road, it becomes tighter.
Yeah,
Granted, there's only 2 houses, but you're not gonna have as nice an access or an easy of an access for emergency vehicles.
I probably all of Beacon Street there is 20 feet or less. And I think with the cul-de-sac, there's a lot of room to park for the 2 houses on the cul-de-sac.
which isn't what the fire department wanted to hear during, when they need access to that either, but.
Yeah, I'll mention that in the PTTF and see if we
People do
want
have to
to
park.
consider no
Yeah.
parking or other in a certain area of Beacon.
Install bituminous curbs instead of granite. Especially where the curb is not, it ends up being part of the drainage, I'm gonna call it the drainage structure, right? How it keeps stormwater within the roadway. That is not something that we have supported. It's also not part of the town standard, but if this isn't trying to be a public street in the future, that's neither here nor there, but this board generally hasn't been supportive where we're relying on that curb to be part of the, to funnel stormwater. Because chances are that curb will be gone in.
The first one.
Not installing sidewalks, we've had different discussions on different cul-de-sacs on that.
I know it's one of those weird things that if you read the regulations, it says that we're looking to put as many sidewalks as possible in town. But then when you're dealing with a development of 2 into a area that doesn't even have sidewalks,
It seems, yeah,
hard to justify.
should be reasonable here, right?
Right, and adding impervious surface to a
Right,
place
right.
where it's very steep.
And someone's just gonna walk down that street anyways, because there's
Exactly.
only two houses worth of traffic, so.
Right.
It doesn't seem on that wise. And then construct a cul-de-sac with a 5% grade rather than 3%. I guess, right, getting some feedback additional feedback from town engineer, I think is gonna be.
Yeah, and probably withhold the vote on that one.
What's that?
And if you were moving forward at any point, withhold the vote on that
Yeah.
one.
And where are you on the granite curbing?
Personally, I would not be in support of granting the waiver.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I don't think we want any water falling over the embankment area, possibly eroding it.
It's just gonna go right into the other cul-de-sac's basement.
Yeah.
That is so steep.
Yes, yeah. So I think we're in pretty good shape here, right? There's a couple of issues and comments to work through. But since this is, I'm gonna say, right, it's preliminary in nature, it's not even is it?
It's not a buildable plan.
Yeah.
Nor is it binding.
But this is an official preliminary subdivision,
Yes.
Right.
it's not conceptual.
Correct.
I assume the additional waivers are the traditional waivers that are requested in the subdivision. The traffic plan, the environmental impact studies, et cetera, would come for the full subdivision, not at the preliminary stage.
Correct, those are all requirements under section 5.
Okay.
Not 4.
So I guess from a preliminary standpoint here, I'm not entirely comfortable with voting on this until we get a read on the proof plan and an interpretation of that. Right, because that's sort of that's
It's a,
the core
yeah.
the core information here.
Just, could you clarify that for me? You want staff to look at the proof plan, but I thought the proof plan wasn't necessary according to what was Andrew said earlier.
So the proof
What
of
was it, the
60,
lotting plan that you want us to look at?
yes, in essence, the lotting plan, so the 60-foot bulb
Okay, that-
needs to be
That
looked at.
clarifies it
Yeah.
for me.
Aside from that issue, do we have any others that need to be? I mean, they've heard all our comments,
Right.
but it's something that's not binding. It's, I think.
Yeah, I too would probably prefer to get the 60-foot bulb clarified before a vote. As
Yeah.
confident as I'd like to be, it could be done in a definitive. I'd rather know now than.
Yeah, because this is the basis of the
Yeah.
entire thing. And if that bulb needs to be shifted some, then
What's that do
then
to-
that does quite a bit. That could do quite a bit in terms of the grades and all that. So
And you're talking with that, the retention wall as well too that supports it?
Correct, and
Yep.
I imagine if that shifted, yeah, the wall would shift as well.
so I my sense is that we continue this.
Do we have to do public comment before we do that?
We do. Thank you. Do we have any public comment, either online or in person? It's always hard to remember when there's.
Got Mr. Mark Delaney on the Zoom call.
Good evening. I'm in my vacation attire, so I didn't get dressed up for this meeting. I have a question with respect to the lot right across the street from the existing single-family residence. So, I mean, I don't expect anybody's walked up here, but I look at that property, they have a white picket fence that's, 3 or 4 feet high. Based on what I see here, if they were to change their fence or paint it, would they have to be standing in the roadway to be able to do that to their fence?
Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a retaining wall along this border. You're correct. And Mark, I believe this is the lot you were in question of.
Yes, Andrew, you're right.
Yeah, right now that fence is on their property line. If you look at the topo sheet, you can see that fence just inside their property line. The existing conditions plan, sheet number 3. There you go. And if you zoom in close there, Andrew, down right at that intersection. Yep. The fence actually goes out into Beacon Street, but opposite the house at 45 Beacon Street, it's right on their lot line.
Okay, my question was, usually you would have, if not a sidewalk, you'd have some land before you're standing on the street, right? If that's your fence. Again, I wanna repaint my fence. Am I gonna be standing in the street to do that? I think Andrew pointed out there's gonna be some wall built there.
That's correct.
So there'll be a wall, how many feet from this person's property? Is it right up to their property?
At the end where the Beacon Street intersects, it's right close to the property line. At the far end, it's maybe, let's say, 6 feet off the property line.
Okay. It's, you know, I'm not an engineer, so I look at this map, it looks like it's, you know, a couple of inches away from the fence. You got
Right.
cars driving by your fence like that. I wouldn't want that. So obviously this
Right.
is,
That's where the road's laid out. There's nothing you can do about it.
yeah, understood. The board asked a lot of good questions. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. A lot of this plan is on inches. And some of those inches, right, may not even be constructible. Right, and looking at a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, trying to zoom in, you can't tell, right? So, I expect that there will be a lot of tweaks and adjustments to this, because, right, you can't build that retaining wall probably the way it shows on my 8.5 by 11 sheet.
Yeah, we had questions
yeah.
about that as well.
Yeah, so. But that's why we have preliminary and final.
Check the Zoom.
So I guess I'd like to continue this if we can. And I presume that, right, it's staff that needs to provide the input. And that, right, we can do that for the
Yeah,
next meeting.
we'll do a quick, we'll review and comment as soon as possible, and if there's adjustments needed, we'll request them to get done before the meeting.
Do we have a date and time that we can suggest?
You're wide open on Monday, September 11th, so I would likely schedule this at 7:30.
Thought we were dropping the time.
We are dropping the
Okay.
time.
That gives you more flexibility when planning out the night.
Does, thank you for the reminder. So as long as that works for Phil and the applicant, September 11th, if you could come back.
That's fine. Yeah.
That's a family station.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Motion to continue the preliminary subdivision plan for 45 Beacon Street to Monday night, September 11th.
Second it.
All those in favor? All right.
Great, Phil, if we need anything, we'll be in touch as soon as possible.
Thank
you.
you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
This is your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay.
All right.
Planning updates and other topics.
Well,
Thank you, everybody.
thanks.
Thank you. We seem to get this.
This is rare.
This is what happens when We're in charge.
Yeah. Yeah, not really.
So if you want to just take them in order.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So the 18 Woburn Street, you might have seen it recently, getting closer and closer to moving on with construction. They're nearing exterior materials. I think they'd like to begin with exterior materials in order to get that building weather tight and do interior throughout the winter and get all of the things off the sidewalk and road construction, all that out of the way and done. So they've submitted a palette, which is over there, and I can grab it in just 1 second. But we marked up a plan as well to highlight the materials proposed, and I got all of these things in my way over here. But in essence, almost everything is as it appears, but I had a few quick questions as it was presented. I had a few quick questions for you guys because specifically related to 2 items. So the clapboard material on the upper floors here, and all of this continues around the other side of the buildings as well. It's a bit lighter on the material samples than we've seen in the renderings.
Is that D? No.
This is indeed D, yes.
D.
The paint that's on there, the paint swatch is the color they're intending it for
Oh,
be.
okay.
So they're kind of beigeier, not exactly
Not
white.
this.
But
Okay.
it is lighter,
It
it
is
is
pretty
lighter
light.
than
Yeah.
what is on the rendering.
So we had questioned if we wanted to keep the material darker to more match the concrete below, or provide different, I guess a visual break in a different sense. I can't pretend to be an architect, so luckily we have a new architect. But
I mean, if you want the visual break, you're gonna need an actual color, not one of the grays or beiges. So yes, going with the granite-ish color at the base might work.
yeah, the applicant's open to any comment and feedback, but
Hillary.
Just trying to see that green color over there.
Yeah, you should look at that.
Yeah, we'll, let's go through everything and then we
The color
can,
that the top is gonna be painted is the same color as the banding in between the bottom brick section and the second floor brick section.
Okay.
So that's the intention is like that, those colors would be the same. And then the green they're going with, which is sample somewhere here, is much grayer and lighter and is not this green.
Good.
So it's that kind of, not quite sure what to call it,
so
but
on that too, what was proposed was aluminum side paneling. They've now revised that to a hardy plank panel that are large panel size, I think similar to what you would see on Rise 475 on that facade. But they're larger panels colored in a similar tone.
And then what's going to be around the windows if it's such a light? Is it?
That is a precast concrete. That is a sample F, I believe.
it's like no, it's all the same.
Yeah, because I would kind
There's no
of,
contrast.
I would prefer, I mean personally, I would pick something slightly darker than the gossamer veil
You mean for D?
for the
third floor.
Yeah,
upper portion.
yeah.
We should go to the other sides as well, just
Yes.
because that's what's going on the entire
Yeah.
back.
So this comes down the right of way into the Upper Haven lot, so it continues around, and this is the rear facade that you would see from the lot itself. Oh no, sorry, this is the rear facade from the lot
That's the
itself,
side
this is the
that's
side to
facing
the
it.
building.
Yeah.
And also on this facade, to note, the other 3 elevations are full brick course. The applicant, cause had noted that this is a brick veneer. A little different, but it's
And are there cars near that brick veneer? Is there?
there is
It's on the
not,
north side, right?
there's no parking or drive through there. It's really just a residential entry.
You'll be able to see it from Main Street, but not, you'll only get up close if you're going in that entrance.
Yeah.
But if you're driving near there, brick veneer could be damaged.
Yeah, I don't, right, there's no way to get, No.
And then
Outside of
it's like
the
3 feet to the next
corner,
building.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like just a like human
Alleyway,
sized walkway, yeah,
Just making sure I'm reading everything the right way. That was not part of the other.
Yeah, personally, I think I'm with what you guys are saying. Right, these two colors are sort of, they're two,
No, I'm okay.
they're almost the same. And then with the precast concrete, like you have too many things that are just gonna meld into the same tone. Not enough contrast.
I like the less green, if you will. But this is the precast, right? Dark buff?
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
Andrew, am I right, or is it just my eyesight? I thought that the balconies on the street were extended over the sidewalks. Was I wrong?
The balconies do project,
I mean, it's a reverse of what they have.
I believe so. This building is a 2-foot setback, so they had proposed, sidewalk to extend to the building, but it's within their lot still.
Is this supposed to be, is that?
That's that light part here.
Oh, yeah.
If you also notice on the building, the doors are white currently, they will be painted black.
I think that needs to be darker than that, that the, sort of as it's shown on here, that needs to be darker than the cement,
Darker than these, yeah.
not lighter.
Yeah, what I'm, cause this may get darker over time, but.
Are you guys all done?
You're not.
You're right. It had nothing to do with CPDC, but this is the Board of Appeals on Beacon Street, stating only one house.
We don't wanna take public comment with it closed
that's why
just
I
yet,
don't wanna-
yeah.
that's why I wanted to have the meeting.
But certainly Ally will take another look, I do recall
Is it the
reviewing
last-
this, yep,
Second to last thing. One house.
yep.
I don't know, I like this green better,
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you guys.
but. Are they, so what's the next step, like, do they
So they
update
provide comments and then they make revisions if we provide them with comments that we.
do they update the render or they update?
I'd probably get a hard sample, but ideally like we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Soon,
My sense, for what it's worth, is probably more important that it blends with, I think, Venetian moons to the left of that, up there. That it probably blends with the rest that's going on there than the individual. I'm not gonna choose colors, cause I'm not good at that. So,
I think it could be okay. Like, I think this concrete will start to darken, which will give it that contrast that they're showing. It's like reverse of what they're showing. But in my opinion, I might pick something similar when I see all these together. And your statement about next door. But it's hard. These little pieces are
Yeah.
very little.
yeah, so it bridges me into like, a future conversation of what design review might look like, but.
Right, and I mean, when I do samples, they're usually bigger and painted or like provided by when I prepare them for the people, so.
That's also the boards we're familiar with,
Yeah.
sample boards, a little bit larger. Is there any concern on the aluminum going to hardy plank?
I have no concern
So,
personally.
So there's the next door.
Yeah.
Where, like you're saying, is this cement, the
Has
cement
darkened.
pillars have darkened
Yeah.
quite a bit.
So like, were they trying to do like a Rhine zinc or some aluminum panel like that, or is, I mean, hardy panel, we tend to end up with that.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't fully understand the question.
What they were originally going for.
What was
Oh.
the original?
Um,
Just aluminum
just
painted,
aluminum
was
paint.
it painted?
I don't recall a specific material, yeah. Let me see if I can find it.
Is the hardy materials concrete?
Yeah, it's
The
this,
concrete board?
it would
Yeah.
look like the back of,
Yeah.
it's just without wood, or would it would be plain without the wood embossed, the hardy panel? I think you can get it multiple ways.
Mhm.
And then the clapboard, that's also hardy plank? That's this stuff?
Yep.
Well, the good thing, right, and the most important thing is nothing's offensive, right? Nothing is, the colors they've picked are
They're not pink.
not pink.
You have to give a caveat that there's nothing wrong with pink.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with pink. Yeah, there's a lot of people that didn't really like a big pink building, but
But I think it has the brick, it has
Yeah.
the concrete, that's present. It's just different than what
Yeah.
you were showing in the rendering.
Maybe a little milder.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, can you repeat your question on the hardy plank material?
So
wood
just like,
lining?
just to make sure that the hardy plank is not an emboss, like there's gotta be, it would be nice if there's maintain the difference, like like the plank, the
Mhm.
clapboard
Mhm.
would have like, is that gonna have the wood?
Don't know.
I'm curious. Cause you can get it, yeah.
I would lean yes.
Whatever the actual like physical thing you're holding, that's what it's gonna be. Cool. Then they, just put the pink stuff on top.
But this is not hardy plank. This is like something else.
That is something else, that is correct.
I've heard some great things about the hardy plank, but I've also heard some negatives, and I can't remember with regard to shrinkage or anything like that. I just don't know, but I mean, to me, whatever, if they're using a mix of materials, and I'm assuming they know what's best, that they're compatible.
Here's a bad assumption. What's best versus what's most affordable.
Right,
Hardy plank is not cheap. from
it's
what I
not, but
understand.
it's very long lasting, so.
Yes, right, which is good. It's one of its attributes.
Looks nice.
Thank you.
So what do you need from us?
I do not need anything, actually. Hillary, maybe if you wanna summarize your comments and questions in an email to make sure I got
Do that.
right, that would be great. And this is a bit of a side conversation that we don't have to have now, but I've been thinking as we were working through this process, we've seen examples of design review committees from other municipalities, and they aren't necessarily the planning board alone. And so I've been thinking if you guys were open to it, I could see what that looks like, and maybe if it was a member of CPDC, a member of permanent building committee, or residents of interest in the field of like design and look, and they typically, I guess, hold meetings outside of like your planning board hearing, and both the applicant and the board brings material samples and discusses the merits back and forth and come to a final conclusion together. And it sounds like a nice process, cause again, not an architect by any means. I don't necessarily know the ins and outs, and I know a lot of board members don't either. So if we could get like others involved who have more expertise, I'd certainly be open to it, but I do defer to you guys. I know it's been a standing condition on a lot of 40R projects.
I just look to make sure it's not offensive to the
Yeah.
eye.
I figured so.
I think establishing a committee for something like that needs to be, we would need to make sure that it's only for
Yeah.
something that's larger that can withstand the added expense,
Mm-hmm.
right, of additional input.
Mm-hmm.
That will invariably be looking for more expensive materials
Mhm.
than the developer,
Right.
had planned, so.
Good point.
I think there is some room for that in some of these, some bigger developments.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I wouldn't, for example, I wouldn't wanna set that up for, was it the Chase Bank? That we did, because they're not going anywhere.
That
I
makes
mean,
sense.
they've got their kid,
It's
they're
not-
not,
yeah,
like, they're just setting up, frustration.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I'll look into it a bit
But,
more.
yeah.
No rush or true need, just.
Continuing that thought process, or the 4-unit Village Street
Mm-hmm.
building that put up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's,
It's more for the, I don't wanna call them landmark buildings, but
Mhm.
the
yes,
stuff that's substantial and actually will be a benefit to the town.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could frame it up if we ever move forward with it,
Yeah.
of things related to design guidelines or
But
projects.
we're not
that-
allowed to set up new committees, that would be the
No.
select board.
Yeah. Right, so it could be a process.
Like
so-
a subcommittee.
Right.
On this one.
But anyways, there's just a general preliminary thought. I've talked to a few others on design reviews and how they go about it, so.
My only concern here is noticing the meetings and everything else that goes along with this.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question back about the Hardy panel.
Mhm.
A question would be if there's gonna be exposed fasteners, are you gonna see the rivets or installed like buttons
Question.
on there, or is it gonna be painted to match?
Mm-hmm.
Because it could be something that's not so exciting if there were buttons.
Rivets?
Yeah,
Mhm.
rivets all over.
Yeah.
Unless they're part of the design element, that's fine.
Well, it would have to be thought about and
Yeah.
installed.
Okay.
Fun. Okay.
all right, MBTA communities,
Yeah. Is this the one?
No, not that one. You have it on here, you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some slides. We thought since we have some new commission members, it'd be a good opportunity to just revisit what MBTA Communities Law is, make sure everyone's on the same page, before we head into a lot of public comment about it.
This is related to that survey.
This is, survey is part of our process. Did you take our survey?
Yes, I did. I got my husband to do it too.
Amazing, amazing. Great.
You can go ahead if you like.
Can we take it off? Yeah, cool. This is just a recap of what the law is and what we have to do in Reading. The timeline for Reading, just a reminder for everyone, because we are classified as a commuter rail community, our timeline for compliance is by the end of 2024. And what we have to do by the end of 2024 is confirm to the state that we have a zoning district in Reading with by right zone capacity for 1,493 units of multifamily housing. Multifamily housing, just to remind everyone, is at least 3 units on one lot. And because we are classified as a commuter rail community, that means that our kind of like zone that we're focused on under the law is a half-mile circle around the Reading train depot downtown. the top line takeaway to remember is that we do not currently have a zoning district that meets the requirements of the state. We do have multiple multifamily zoning districts and ones that are within that half-mile radius around the train depot downtown, but none of them meet all of the requirements under the law for the unit capacity, the density, the acreage, kind of all the check boxes you have to go to submit to the state to say, yes, we comply. Anything else to add?
Nope.
This is the core concept of the law and one that we have started trying to figure out how to explain to people. We're going through iterations of trying to figure out how to explain it to people, which is zoning capacity. The way that the law works is that it treats every single parcel as if there's nothing on it. So it completely ignores what already exists in town. It does not matter for compliance with the law. So it treats every single parcel as if it is empty. And then it takes your zoning bylaw, your zoning code, and it goes through and says, what is allowed to be built on this lot? And then calculates up the actual unit capacity of what could be built in present day under the law for that lot. So the example that's here on the screen, we have a hypothetical duplex. Under the law, it counts as 0. And in this scenario, right, where you're saying what could be built under zoning and maybe a multifamily district, it could count as 4, if that is the maximum capacity that's zoned for.
What happens if you have a 6 unit on that same lot? Does that count as a 6 for capacity? Or
That's
does it
already
still count
built there?
It's already built there, or does it count as a 4?
It counts, in this scenario, right, if we're saying like, let's just say that this was zoned for up to, it depends on like basically how your zoning is currently written. What's there right now doesn't matter.
Okay.
So we have a lot of, for example, in like our historic areas of downtown, there are duplexes, there are triplexes, there are fourplexes that cannot be built again today under the law, right? So those count as 1 or 0.
Okay.
Right, so like for another example that this group will probably understand, right? In the downtown smart growth district, there's a certain number of units that were allowed, and then there were waivers to allow other units on top of those. All the units that were approved by the Cpdc under special waivers, none of those count because they're not by right. Only what's developed by right counts for the unit capacity.
And unit capacity relates directly to the other dimensional controls of zoning. So if it's a 15,000 square foot minimum and you have a 10,000 square foot lot, 0. So it ties back directly to what's allowed by zoning.
Hypothetically, do we run into any spot zoning issues when we start doing this zone?
We do not.
If we wanna save, let's say, a historic building here, it's always gonna be one, no matter what it is, but around it might be zoned appropriately.
I don't foresee running into that issue. There's no site-specific development being engaged on here, so we do have flexibility in location and as well as use and dimensional controls. We have multiple paths forward, so that's what we're figuring out now that Mary will get to.
As Mary's pointing out, this is not what is built, this is not what will be built in the future, this is what
Could be.
could be.
Right.
Yeah, the kind of preliminary presentations we've done to some of the boards, we're not sure people are grasping. There's a real focus on people are continuing to use the word construction as if the 1,500 units are going to be built. There is already existing capacity in our districts, which is a little bit of what's on this slide. The kind of existing unit capacity and then the added potential capacity. Like you're saying, this is not construction. This is all things that could be built if developers find the economic conditions appealing, right? That's what we're zoning for. Again, because we have new commission members, we thought it was helpful to just kind of revisit what's been done so far. I don't know if everyone here has had a chance to read the early technical assistance memo that was done. I highly recommend that you do. The table that's on here and some of the information that is on this slide comes directly from that memo. In the early technical assistance, we had, who was it that went through? Who's the firm? RKG went through and took a look at a selection of zoning districts to analyze in current existing conditions what the acreage is, what the unit capacity, and then what the unit density is to kind of say, you know, that's kind of how we got to the point of saying, we know that none of our districts comply. To talk about this, right, so we looked at the A40, we looked at just at this A40 that's north of downtown, because the other sections of A40 that fall within, so the blue circle here is the half-mile radius of the train depot, which is here on the map. The other sections of A40 are too small, they don't meet the acreage requirements to be considered a district separately on their own. So if you look just at that A40 district, it has a total acres of 17 acres, but it has a unit density of 1 unit per acre. And the reason for that specific district why it is so low is because of the large number of non-conforming lots, which I can show on the next slide. So there's a bunch of reasons why these various districts don't comply, why they have really low numbers. Some of them it's, you know, they on their own, their acreage is too small, and the unit density ends up being very low. For most of them, it's because they have a large number of non-conforming parcels, or maximum lot coverage restrictions. Our parking ratios are a bit high, so it requires a lot of parking spaces. That also does go into the state calculator, or it's the waivers that are required to reach the high density. Any questions on this conceptually? I want to make sure everyone's with me. Yeah? We put this map together just to kind of demonstrate, right? So this is that A40 section we were looking at. In that district, there is only one lot, this lot right here, which has the 40,000 square feet required to develop it, which means that every other parcel in the district is considered a non-conforming lot and counts as 0 in the calculator. And this is obviously one of the primary districts, theoretically, that would be having multifamily housing because it is literally called apartment 40, right? That's was its original intention before it was changed, was that it was a multifamily district. And so this is one of the challenges in when we say like we need to we can take existing districts like this and tweak them, right? And one of the major ways you tweak them is by just lowering that minimum lot size down. And so then all of these parcels here that are considered non-conforming become usable within the calculator and in reality. What was I gonna say?
All I can add to this slide is that, so yes, the zone is specific for multifamily, and the 40,000 square foot minimum is quite high when you look at it like this, and across the town, single family in this zone is a 10,000 square foot minimum, which is less than your standard.
15.
Nope, not an A40.
It's 10.
Oh, A40, you're right. I
Yep,
apologize.
so it's easier to
been
build a
wrong.
single family in your multifamily district than it is to build a multifamily development in your multifamily district.
Which is
So-
a holdover from the original zoning. The original
Yes.
zoning was 10,000 for everything in the
Changed in
district.
1995, we'd love to poke brains on that.
No, it was changed in this one was the 60s.
Oh,
Yeah.
stand corrected as well.
Yeah. So we've been doing lots of research on the history of zoning as well.
Right, which is what
understand.
happens when you, right, like, oh, we'll fix this thing here, we'll fix this thing here. Oh, wait, I didn't realize that they're changing that here, and then you get to the floor of town meeting and they say, oh, no, it's actually, we're gonna put this limitation in there. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, well.
Yeah, and some of the maps, the historical maps, will one day show them soon, hopefully, but it is eye-opening when you see the zones that existed then to now and how substantially similar in 100 years we've remained, which
Yeah,
is
we've
a good
changed
and
it all.
bad thing, right? So,
Yeah.
Because the zones were built on what existed at that time.
Just go over our timeline at a high level, remind people where we're at. Right now, we're kind of wrapping up phase 1 of our research and phase 1 of our engagement. The fall will head us into phase 2, which is like the bulk of the public forum engagement, which we're gonna talk about with you guys in a slide or two. And the research that goes along with that. We are still aiming to take this to town meeting April 2024, that's still the goal. That is gonna be the goal until, or if we discover that we can't. Because we wanna have at least 2 shots to take it to town meeting before we are required for compliance. Phase 1 is what we're in now, right? We have our survey open. Thank you to everyone who has taken it. Our goal is for at least 750 responses. We are on track to meet our minimum goal. We've been at public events. We're doing this month, we're doing a big round of board presentations. We've been at Finance Committee, Conservation, we're at Historical this week, School Committee next week. You did zoning last month. We've been doing email blasts. It's on the town website. We're getting the word out to everyone as much as we can that this process has started. The process is happening. Please share your opinions with us. We put this like preliminary survey result in here because it's one of our favorites. We don't want to spoil the survey results for everyone, but this question is one that we have really been enjoying looking at the results roll in, because this question says, what one item are you most concerned about if there were to be many new multifamily buildings in Reading? The top number 1 response is, all of the above are concerns to me. The number 2 response is, none of the above, the benefits outweigh the concerns. And we are enjoying that response because it is like, there are the pro-housing people and there are the anti-development people, and there are very strong voices, as we've discovered here in Reading, on both sides. Which is honestly great to learn. It's been really, I think, exciting for us to learn that there is a large group of people in Reading who are actually pro-housing, who are pro-development. And maybe their voices aren't as often heard at town meeting or aren't as often heard in other places. So that's been interesting. But the preliminary results from the survey are good. They're in line with our expectations, so. Any questions about anything, phase 1?
My only comment is you're gonna need more than 2 public hearings.
We're planning 4, at least 4.
So on the other side of phase 1, we're doing all our research, right, which is the zoning history. We're looking at dimensional data of the districts within that half-mile radius and what exists today. So we've gathered like the aggregate data of it all. Thank you, building, assessing, GIS. You're not watching, but thank you very much. So a lot of work to get that aggregate data. Now we just need to like put it in a presentable, understandable fashion, and what we'd like to use it with. But it includes like average lot sizes by uses, other dimensional controls by the uses, and summaries of like this zoning to go with the zoning history of kind of how we got here today, and could help inform dimensional controls of the future if appropriate.
So as you have gone through phase 1, do you feel like that people are understanding 2 things? One, what the point, what you're talking about when it's zoning capacity, right? Because zoning is impossible for people to understand to begin with, and then this is like, it's rights that may never be used, and people don't get that, right? That's one thing. It's a hard concept to try and communicate. So I'm interested to hear.
We're iterating.
And 2, whether what reactions people are having with the necessity of it. Like, do you think that you're getting through to people that after you talk with them that like this is not something we can't do? Or do you think that hasn't come across yet? Or are we not there yet?
I would say we're not there yet.
Okay.
This is a topic where there's a very big generational divide.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that people who we speak with who are 40 and younger, you do not need to explain to them why we're doing this, right? In general, not to paint with a broad brush, the older people we've spoken with, there's a lot more questions and a lot more questioning of why we should comply with it. So that's something we've been working through, how we want to present it, what we feel is kind of like, what we feel are the most compelling arguments. Which is a bit of what we have here in discussions about like how we want to kick off the series of forums, like how we put forth this series of topics in a way that takes people into the conversation and ideally answers more questions than it asks. asks, right? Because I feel like in the kind of brief presentations we've been doing to try to just let people know that we're working on this, they've all raised many more questions than we were intending to answer in like a 10-minute presentation on the topic, which is great. It means people are interested and engaged and that people want to know the details. We have felt bad, we've like hijacked a few commission meetings thinking we're gonna give a 10-minute presentation that ended up with like an hour of questions because the commission members were so engaged on the topic. So.
Yeah,
Anything?
no, I think then it's
Yeah.
it's getting through. It's
Yeah.
just a question of like, you know, because we have the reasons on one side to comply for the law reasons, and then the answers of, well, when you look at the data and the housing demographics, it's the underlying reason why. And I think that's striking, but I think people still are curious, like, how is this really going to solve that? So that's really kind of the overarching point in question.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to try to find an answer to, whatever path we choose.
Are you doing any research on train capacity? I mean, this whole transit district is set up based on train.
I mean, our requirements are based on the MBTA. The MBTA themselves has no requirements in relation to the law. So we've like submitted asks to MBTA representatives to be like, could we have a discussion with you about future train service? Because we're getting questions about it from residents, from board members we've spoken with. So we'll see what we get.
Not to-
Anyone has a great contact at the MBTA,
I
please
do.
hook
This
us
is
up.
what I do in my day job. I'll say the MBTA is, commuter rail system is transitioning from, if you don't know, from a commuter-based system, right, where we all rush to get on the train at 7 a.m. To one that operates at it more regularly throughout the day. They do the MBTA commuter rail system is, since the pandemic, has really transitioned from one that is focused. I mean, the ridership has changed to one that's much more higher riderships on Saturdays and Sundays, and so that opens up capacity. That's a good thing. Opens up capacity for the commuter rail system, and it just shows that people are using it a different way, dramatically. So, it's hard for them. I know it's hard for the MBTA to answer because there's this, as we all probably in all of our jobs, is like, are we gonna revert back to some form and function as we did before, or is there some fundamental change that has happened the past couple of years? And the T still can't answer that. But if it looks like there's been some fundamental change, then capacity is not an issue on commuter rail. It's about, honestly, right? It's about money to buy new vehicles to be able to operate it in a different way than they did before. So it's a whole different thing. That's more about the State House and less about the MBTA to actually do something about it. It's more about, if all communities start to change, then is the State House gonna recognize that change and put money into the T the way that it needs to be done, right? That's a statement that could be taken a lot of different ways about, how money goes into the T and how effective that is. So.
Thank you. Love the question. I'll keep making the asks. So,
You should keep making the asks. Yeah. The easiest thing, I'll just put a plug in here, the easiest thing for Reading, right, would be if they could just double track over Ash Street and increase the flexibility of the station here.
Yeah.
Would be a huge improvement without a huge cost. So if you're looking for an ask, that's what we make.
Do they really need to double track? They've got 3 tracks, off General Way and back there. They can just wait and
If you were to double track into the station, it gives just more flexibility on how they schedule the services. More trains could lay over here without having to get out of the way for the other trains. So, it just adds more flexibility. But right, there does come with a cost.
Of course,
Yeah, because you have to build high-level platforms.
Yeah.
And that would change the depot.
Great points.
So we're on track to close the survey at the end of the month, and that will lead us into the next phase. We're in our presentations we've been doing to boards, and we're doing a presentation at the Pleasant Street Center with the seniors this Thursday. We're testing slides and doing things to kind of prepare for our first forum, testing some concepts, kind of seeing what resonates with people and what doesn't, so that's been really helpful. But we thought it was a good opportunity to chat with all of you while we're still early in the phases of planning our first public forum. If there are any strong opinions among this group as to what is kind of hypothetically more compelling arguments, we're planning on it being about a 90-minute meeting, Monday, September 18th. We're leaning towards doing in-person only, but it will be recorded and broadcast, but not having virtual attendance, just so it's easier for us to manage. We will need CPDC representation at the meeting and at all the forums. This is the only one we have a date for so far. We don't need everybody there, but we want to make sure there's at least 1 or 2 people, and or if at least afterwards, if the rest of you want to watch the recordings or watch it broadcast. The topics we right now have tentatively in our list of what to cover. Again, we're thinking like a 90-minute meeting, like 60 minutes of content. One of the big ones that we have to cover, because it's kind of what leads into answering all the questions, is like a short history of zoning in Reading, which explains how we ended up with so many districts where the parcel size in reality has no relation to what it says in the zoning bylaw. So that's a question that we have to answer very early on and repeatedly for people, which requires us giving kind of a brief history of zoning. That leads into kind of current housing data that underpins why the discussion is happening now. We obviously have to cover what the law is in some level of detail. We think it's actually better to cover that later, once people kind of wrap their heads around some of the concepts first. We found when we start with the law, people get so sidetracked looking at the numbers and trying to figure it out that then they can't focus on anything else we say afterwards. We want to present the survey results, obviously. We'll have that done and wrapped up, and then the survey results lead us into kind of a first round of explaining conceptual proposals, so how we're interpreting those survey results moving forward into zoning proposals. Kind of what they lead us towards crossing out as options and what they highlight for us as future options. And there's like the in-meeting app voting programs, and putting up various things and having people actually in the meeting give us live feedback. And maybe handouts, question mark. Do you have specific questions?
No.
It's a lot. There's a lot of content. We were joking. We were like, oh gosh, we could put together like a 3-hour meeting. Like it would be horrible, but also super educational. So we're narrowing down what we think will be most effective.
Yeah, and I mean, we can chat about what conceptual proposals look like. They're not gonna be the super in detailed, very specific dimensional of certain uses. I think it comes back to the form and location that we've been asking in the survey of what do you find appropriate, and re-asking that again to make sure that the survey, whatever those findings are, also stands on its legs with the in-person activity, town meet, everybody involved in the present, to kind of start seeing what those look like on a map and where, and really putting it to a visual and workshop. Maybe this first forum isn't necessarily a workshopping exercise, but starting to lead there.
Are you involving any developers?
No, it's been one thing I've noted on my list of, to date, we haven't necessarily involved developers because there are still the paths forward, the variable paths forward. I don't know that I will, I'd like to ask them, how do I put this, that what we're putting forward is buildable and workable in development and not too restrictive. But I've shied away towards a developer presenting to the public and saying, here's what we need, here's what we do, this is why,
I agree, because we've seen what developers would like to do, and that's extend out as much as possible.
I think in the beginning stage of this, where we are right now, specifically not having that input is probably a good idea. Right, because we need to build the vision and then figure out, how to get to that vision. How do you get there, right? Through zoning, right? First, and then whether that zoning is usable.
Yeah,
But by the end, right? By the end, we do need to do that.
Yeah.
well, I agree with you. The difficulty with a lot of developers, they're only gonna build something that's gonna give a profit. And that doesn't necessarily mesh what the town needs maybe. I mean, I can see what some of the town needs may conceivably be, because, MTBA's got one issue there, but a lot of more people are working from home now and not going into Boston, for example.
The other thing, though, which I think my take is what the state wants, is that if you have, I don't know how many towns there are that are
177.
All right, so if you have 176 towns that are all, right, it's all gonna be different, but a lot of them, let's say half of them are gonna look for developments that are similar to what we have, because you know what, this is New England and we're not all that different from, a lot of other towns in eastern Massachusetts. So if we're all coming up with something and suddenly those types of buildings can be built without going through us, without going through boards, you know what? Developers are gonna figure out some way to build those and make money, right? Because it's not just Reading, it's gonna be all over the place, like suddenly, like people can just buy up property and say, yeah, put up stuff and not comply, not have to hassle with boards, right? So, right, I think we do, that's gonna be interesting of what this starts to spur.
Yeah.
Which is the hope, right, that it does it does create some different types of development scenarios. Because right now, probably a lot of what you're saying, like no one would touch. I don't know what you're saying yet. That's a point, right?
Yeah, no.
Like, I don't even know what your proposal is, but a lot of it, probably you wouldn't get a developer to build.
Totally.
If it was just Reading only doing this.
And to your point on the unit capacity question, if people are getting it and what this all means, I think that's why we were thinking handouts or something that people can use beyond the forum to understand from a bird's eye view what this all means. And our web pages are there and everything, but we want something that's a bit more direct. So I think we're gonna try to work on that and hopefully have it done by the September forum, but something that people can use and start to rethink about a lot of these concepts and what it means. So, we'll clarify our survey's intent and what it was designed for, and some of the responses or lack of answers available that we've gotten comments on to date, and why it was set up that way, which is really to inform zoning decisions to comply and not to engage on compliance or not comply. So we'll clarify all of that, but
Yeah, the only feedback we've gotten about the survey has been negative, but as he and I have discussed, the reason is because the people who agreed with it took it and moved on with their life. So, and the only feedback we've gotten is just people wishing that we had straight up asked, like allowed them to say no to the options, to be like, which of these do you want? And they wanted there to be like a none. And we were like, I hear you, we hear you, also, that's why he's saying like clarifying the point of the survey.
Yeah.
Like the intention of it, which
Yeah.
was that it's to give us usable information to move forward. And while it is always helpful to understand that there are a large number of people who maybe aren't interested, ultimately for compliance with the law, not as helpful for the two of us. So, yeah. If anyone, as you think about this or as you read the FAQ, if you have any thoughts, any strong views, please let us know. We're gonna be working on this, obviously. There will be another CPDC meeting before this next forum, where we'll probably go through maybe things a bit more concretely, depending on the amount of time that we have in the next meeting, depending on what's on the agenda. But we encourage all of you to be as involved in the process as you want.
Do you know the time of that forum yet, or is it?
it's likely to be 6 or 7 p.m. I would imagine.
Probably 7 p.m.
Yeah, probably 7.
We're gonna start announcing it soon, so we have to,
Yeah.
we're gonna nail it down.
Yeah.
Just making sure I can go.
I would venture to guess in the library as long as it's open, but.
We've had over 300 people who took the survey said they wanted to like stay in touch through the process. So we're not sure how big the meetings are gonna be. We'll see.
As soon as you start drawing districts.
Probably.
Well, you know,
Which is like the goal of the handout, so like we don't have to keep re-saying the same thing in the second, third, fourth forum.
Yeah, because you won't have time.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure we will have to,
Yeah,
but it's
yes.
fine, but to minimize it as much as possible would be nice.
I don't think you're gonna make April.
It's gonna be tough, for sure.
It's an aggressive timeline.
It's virtually impossible if you don't have any zoning changes written by September. The April town meeting, you're gonna have to close out the warrant by
February.
February. You're looking at January to actually hold the zoning meetings and votes, and you don't even have your first regulation written.
I think we have strong ideas about where we're headed.
Yeah, I think what we'll want to do in September too, or as we start figuring out these paths and what is appropriate, is working with you guys of, okay, well now what does the zoning look like? Is it underlying amendments? Is it an overlay? Is it other alternative? But I hope that the overarching goal of whatever zoning is done is simple in nature. Like the 40R bylaw is complex, the sign bylaw is complex. For site plan and others, they can be a bit more straightforward if we focus solely on use and dimensional aspects and control and go from there. So I'm sure there will be other elements, parking, open space, but to keep it as flexible and straightforward at the same time as possible is the goal.
One final question, are we teaming with any other commuter district, or do we want to?
So we're in a group process with CHAPA, who is Citizens Housing and Planning Authority here, nonprofit housing organization, and they've looped us in on some regional groups and put us in groups that also have town meeting and commuter rail, difference in similar processes and timelines. And while we're all very similar kind of in maybe engagement process or high level thoughts or questions on how to approach engagement around this, everybody's zoning is so different based on the context of their community and where they're going that we're not necessarily like partnering with them on like writing zoning that works for our subsector of region. So yes and no to answer your question.
There's a lot of sharing of resources for sure, but every town is pretty unique in the way they're going about it based on their existing districts.
I'll just reiterate a few things that I've said before. Really use real world examples.
Mm-hmm.
When you're telling people that, all right, on a 10,000 square foot lot, you'd have 4 units. By the way, here is somebody who has 4 units on a 10,000 square foot lot.
We are working on that. And we have shown some examples of multifamily in Reading, and within that half mile, we just haven't given like the specifics of the lots and where they are. But we're giving visual context to what these look like.
Do you foresee being able to have allowing for a lesser density on lots? For example, multifamily housing requires 3 units per lot. Most of the lots in this area are 5,000 square feet. Therefore, 2 units technically meets the 15 unit density. You'd have to go up to 3 units to meet the regulation. People may not wish to try and squeeze 3 onto a 5,000, but they might be willing to put 2 on a 5,000 square foot lot.
We will not get a waiver or lesser restrictions on the definition of multifamily, so we have to make 3 work at min or max. But to answer your question on parcel specifics, I think, again, coming back to what is hopefully zoning specific is flexibility, and while that zoning could allow 3 or 4, 1 or 2 can still be provided on that lot, and nobody is stopping anybody from building a single family or 2 family or other on that lot, or keeping what exists today for the next 100 years. So it's hard on a parcel level to get into the specifics, but zone wide, no, we have to hit the 15 units per acre.
And 3 unit definition.
Yeah, allowed in that, yeah.
And do we have any clue where we're planning on for parking?
No, not yet. I think I'd like to think I know where it's going. That's a different discussion based on the use, multifamily use desirable in town. And even then, it's really not. I would venture to try to promote 1 to 1.25 per unit, whether that's mid-rise, 3, 4, 8, 10. Hopefully we can get to that endpoint, but I don't know that, we'll see. That's a hard data. We don't really have data outside of like MAPC, projections and recommendations, and other parking's a hard thing for us to tabulate what exists today. Like if we have a 3-family structure, how much parking really is there? We just see a driveway on like GIS, and so we don't count parking on a single family, we just require driveway. So we don't really have a parking count to unit that exists that we can use to back up outside of like planning best practices for the future.
You might want to on that check with the police department and also like DOT for road widths.
Mm-hmm.
So you have those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's gonna force more people parking in the street.
Mm-hmm.
You can't in Reading. You're not allowed overnight parking in the street.
You might have to change that with this going in.
The goal is transit oriented development, and continue to push and plan and promote those types of changes in town. But again, it's a long-term vision around this whole thing, and it doesn't stop here at the zoning. We personally would see it to now put the gas on, whether it's a bike and ped plan, whether that's MBTA, whether that's whatever, so this is step 1, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Well, I will not be able to make the September 18th meeting, so.
Okay. I don't think we're gonna be asking anything of you guys specifically there, other than maybe be there and help, like if there's any roundtable discussion, or if you have questions, other questions that come to mind, but like I'm not asking you guys to get up and speak at that point or anything.
No.
Just as a fast aside, how many acres are within a half mile radius?
We were just talking about
That's a
this
good
earlier.
question.
I can tell you, it's not up there anymore. What is it? The Business B DSGD is like 43 acres. So that one zone is basically the size that we're required to zone for. Just that one within
Oh.
the half mile. So the half mile is really big. You don't have it, do you?
The map? I do have the map.
Well, I can put it to Google.
I can calculate the numbers very quickly.
We've been doing a lot of math.
I've been doing them on an individual. That's.
You might be doing this already, but you might want to check each of the roads, how much are within a half mile as the road goes, not as the crow flies. Because this is really commuter. I mean, I had one formerly where it took you 2 miles to get to where the bus lot was, because you had to go way around, and there's no way that person would have walked that to get to the commuter line.
Yeah, we've definitely been considering that, particularly on the south side where it's mostly single family, like as you start heading that way. There's like a lot of cul-de-sacs that go out the wrong direction, where like you're headed away from the depot. Where it's like, I don't know how long of a walk that would be, like just theoretically, right? If we're saying like, if you really wanted to say it's transferring to development and you wanna stay within like, say, a 10-minute walk, like how we have thought about this, right? Like if you're actually walking from various places in that circle, what does that walk like? So we're thinking about it as we do our analysis.
It's taking a little longer, but you're upwards over 200 acres, 300 plus acres
Yeah.
within that half mile. I'll have those numbers next time.
And within that, we need to rezone, I'm gonna use that term, I'm not sure what else to call it. Rezone a minimum of 45-ish acres. But we also, does that 45 acres play out to the density and the number of units we need? Or like if I just took like, okay, it's gonna be these 45 acres and apply the numbers, the number of, the density, would we get to that number? Or do we need to do something bigger because we might do?
I think if you stretched, maybe you could hit the number, but in all likelihood, no, you're not gonna get exactly 43 acres at 1,500 units. We're looking likely beyond to, I guess if you wanna call it, ease the area,
Yeah.
rather than push it all into one.
It obviously depends on what direction people ultimately wanna go in, right? If people suddenly magically change their minds and love big dense buildings, then that's very different from going with smaller, lower density. So there's trade-offs.
Great questions. If we are done, I have a small list of other things to update you guys on, since it's such an early night.
Do you have meeting minutes? I didn't get comments from anyone on the minutes, so I don't know if that means that everyone loved them and there were no comments.
I don't think we've approved the minutes yet.
We have not
either.
approved the minutes. I do have one comment on the 7:10 minutes, page 4.
Give me just a minute. So it's 7:10, page 4.
Fourth full paragraph, starting Mr. DeRizzo. Middle of the page of what they were, discussion and the commission members.
Okay.
Right, just discussing.
Yep.
But that was, of them both, that was the only real issue I had.
Perfect.
Not saying that Mary's better at note taking than you, Andrew, but
Oh, there were a lot of typos in the first draft, don't you worry.
That's pretty good spot.
I didn't hear the comment, but I will agree in wholeheartedness, so.
I read through the 612 and didn't have any, and I honestly didn't read the other ones.
It's a nice part about being caught up.
I'm hearing a motion to accept the 6:12 meeting minutes
That's amended.
Second,
as amended.
second.
All those in favor?
And we'll do 7-11 at the next one, or do you feel confident that 3 board members would accept those minutes as of right now?
I'm feeling confident.
Then a motion to accept the 7-11 meeting minute, 7:10, sorry, meeting minutes as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? 3-4, all right.
All right. If you want a few doozies that could spur more discussion, yeah, small list for you. So the census data finally, after 3+ long years, has released the housing data and SHI data for the town of Reading and all across the state. Reading is currently below the 10% requirement at 9.74. So, you know, I've looked at the SHI. The big piece that's missing is, if you recall, the Eaton Lakeview 40B, which was our last 40B approved, I believe. It was split into 2 phases. It was 12 home ownership units along Eaton and 74 rental on the Lakeview side. They were permitted and have now received even occupancy for the homeownership units. They have not started or received a building permit for the 74 rental units, which is in 3 separate buildings. Because they didn't get a building permit within, I believe, 18 to 24 months of their approval, those 74 units lapsed off of the SHI. Until they get a building permit, we will immediately send that new unit form back in, which gets us over 10%. But we're looking, you know, we've asked them for an update, and it seems they're a few months away from anywhere near building permitting. So in the meantime, what that means, hopefully, you know, we're open, yes, for lack of a better term.
How long does the permit last? I know for other agreements, they last for 2 years. So does a 40B exist forever?
It's hard to ever revert a 40B. I would say the zoning board recently, because they were coming up within a year, within lapsing of their ability, you know, it's hard in essence to explain, but zoning board found that their permit has been acted upon and is not susceptible to lapse because they've gotten building permits, occupancy permits, they've completed phase 1, their 40B comprehensive permit is active. It's very hard to never be active, admittedly. But in this sense, that permit is still active and is not susceptible to a toll, of my understanding at this point, because of that finding. So now we're just waiting for the building permit actual application, which is a trigger for the SHI. So 40Bs and 40Rs are treated differently on the SHI in terms of permitting and timelines and lapsing. So that's doozy 1.
Okay.
If you have any questions, let me know. Because this project might not get a public process and site plan process, I do want to put it out there to you guys specifically, and anybody watching, that at 5 Harnden Street, we've received a building permit application for interior fit out, which is the old Walgreens site, for a Dollar Tree use and retail use. It doesn't trigger a site plan review because technically under like the building codes, it's still retail to retail, and they're not adding area, they're not changing parking. What is a concern for staff and that we want a bit more clarifications on is loading and delivery and access. We've found the original approval from the Walgreens site and use, which did waive the loading zone and other, so we're kind of still going through that review to find out what that all means and how it applies to Dollar Tree. But they've applied for the building permit, and if that moves in soon, just know, we staff are reviewing it and, are getting all their clarifications and everything answered. But want to put that out there. Our net zero action plan is kicking off, which isn't really directly related to your board, but it's about a year-long process to do a greenhouse gas inventory and have recommendations to achieve what are the state targets for net zero emission reductions in interval periods. So we'll be working through that process, and what I imagine at the end of it is recommendations on zoning or development standards of sustainability that could be above and beyond what even the state has, or follow suit of other municipalities and see what their charges are. So I haven't seen anything specific in zoning yet related to these items. I've seen other like town standards and documents and proposals, but they're separate from zoning, so I don't know if we'll ever tie in directly with zoning in your guys' work, but it will eventually impact future new development. So just wanted to let you know that is kicking off. We're gonna partner with the Climate Advisory Committee, most likely, for our public engagement around that and all of that, but mostly it's working in-house to figure out what these specific building needs are and what this inventory looks like. But there's a bit of engagement related to it, both awareness, education, and on priorities and recommendations. So that's kicking off. At your last meeting, I believe you had accepted and endorsed the certificate of completion for Lynetta Lane. I will be asking to put a draft on the November town meeting warrant if there's room to accept that road as a public road. I don't quite know what that process looks like fully. We haven't done it in recent time, at least since I've been here, or even 5 years prior to. I would imagine there's some sort of CPDC report element to it, that we approved this project, it was closed and issued a certificate of completion on X date and met town standards to complete and prove, but I also imagine there's a select board element as roadway commissioners and others, so I'll figure out what that looks like. I just wanted to give you a heads up, maybe more specifically to some town meeting CPDC members who will be there. If you haven't seen notice on the town website and we are undergoing a grant award process right now and kicked it off to redesign conceptually Walker's Brook Drive in whatever fashion that may mean. So we are working with Kimley Horn and their sub-consultants around engagement, but it's a very unique tool that right now we're pushing as a survey that, maybe I should have planned to practice to present it on screen, but it's interactive mapping that you can click and drop points of concerns and what you like and don't like about the corridor along with the survey, but the interactive mapping piece is very intuitive and new, so we're hoping it goes well and gets a lot of good comment and feedback. But this is really a public engagement effort around what a redesign could look like, and then getting to X level of design hopefully by the end of it.
Does this have anything to do with the prior Walker's Brook proposal? It had like 2 roundabouts.
It does like dovetail off that effort. Those were very conceptual. So this all started actually back at that Eaton Lakeview 40B, which then recommended a traffic peer review of Lakeview and Walker's Brook, which then evolved into a whole conceptual elements of Walker's Brook, Washington, Ash Street, this, that, and the other. And we've kind of focused now on Walker's Brook as like as that eastern gateway and industrial zone becomes more, I guess, opportune or deserves looking at. So Walker's Brook is a key factor in that. Whether or not a rotary is proposed again in this, and as we find the finer details on survey work and wetland delineation and other elements around that corridor, TBD. So we don't know that a rotary at the end will make sense. It might, we might propose it, but I can't say for sure at this point. But if you would like to be involved, there's a project webpage under economic development. The survey is out. I would encourage you and everybody watching, listening, and your friends and family to take it, and just stay up to date on that one, because it is a big effort and it could have quite an impact on not just what right-of-way and transportation looks like in town, but opening up Walker's Brook, I guess, in the future, and the connection to downtown and Lake Q. So that's ongoing.
Do I need to recuse myself from that one?
I don't think so. It's not a public hearing or vote or anything.
And you do realize that Lakeview is a private way, right?
We are not working on Lakeview, we're working on Walker's Brook Drive. The park efforts from the last year or so ago, year and a half ago. Yeah. Which was the Parking Advisory and Recommendations Committee. So most all the regulations have been implemented. What is left is that kiosk implementation. We've been working with the vendors, we're trying to get them, we're doing the whole thing, but sometime in fall, you'll likely see the kiosks downtown. So we're right now engaging on what, again, to businesses and residents of what the kiosks are, why, how they work, at the whole shebang. But that's happening at the Upper Haven lot and the Brandy Court lot. So we're preparing for those to get implemented in the fall. Hopefully, fall's timelines go to well. And our hazard mitigation planning update that we've been working on for the last 8 to 10 months is coming to a close. The draft plan is out for comment currently, focusing on hazard mitigation specific to climate, typically impact. So similar to our MVP report, but a bit different in the same sense. But hazard mitigation, that draft plan is out for public comment. I believe we're bringing it to the Climate Advisory Committee this Wednesday. Next Wednesday for their comment and final public comment. So if you had interest to review it, there's also a project webpage there, and the draft plan is up. And it's probably likely what you expect, but it's there. So that was my list.
It's a lot.
Yep, that's not everything we're working on.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I should update, and again, not really relevant to your board, but the Millette MVP project has begun construction. So if you drive by Lowell Street, you'd likely see some of the tree clearing, which is always the most eye-opening first part. But we're excited for that to finally be underway and reach completion this fiscal year, and have a nice constructed wetland park system. Yeah.
Andrew, can I ask how any status updates since last meeting on 25 Haven and 246 Walnut Street?
25 Haven, there's no update outside of they've closed on the property and are moving forward towards permitting, but no substantial major update there. Same with 246 Walnut, have not heard from them to date, so I'm imagining they're going through their delineation and survey and soil testing and so on to get the finer details of their review.
25 Haven is meeting with the historical commission
right.
Yeah, that was
this Wednesday.
That's right.
So they'll be attending the meeting on Wednesday to chat with them.
Okay. I'm most interested in the structural engineering report.
Yeah, I don't think they've gotten there yet.
Great. And as I hear the
Bells ring, yeah.
Do we have anything else?
Nope.
Or should we take that as a sign?
Motion to adjourn.
Good second.
All those in favor?
Excellent. Thank you, guys.